Hello and good morning, everyone. It's time for our What's Next with Blended Learning. Welcome to Jason and Eileen for joining us today. So I'm Jody Bauer and I'm from ESU 11. Andrew Easton wasn't able to join us today, so I will be your host. And we're looking forward to a great conversation this morning about connecting UDL, Universal Design for Learning, with blended learning. And I also want to quickly mention that to make sure that you stay tuned for our last 10 minutes of the show for What's New with You, where we invite you to share our tech tools and tips with everyone. So let's get started with our guest today. They will be talking about the connection between UDL and blended learning. And so I want to make sure that you understand their focus is to be connecting on UDL examples, blended learning rubric we used for our first episode. So I'd like to have Jason and Eileen introduce themselves. Eileen, would you like to go first?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Eileen Heller. I'm at ESU 3 as one of their education consultants. I get a chance to work with teachers doing instructional coaching around technology integration, and I have a big passion for universal design for learning and pulling that into their lessons and proactively thinking about it.
Thank you for that. Jason.
Hi, I'm Jason Everett with ESU 10, and my official title is Digital Learning Coordinator, but I focus a lot on UDL and blended learning, and also how that integrates into STEM. We've done a lot of things surrounded with that, with the STEM side of things, so that's where you'll see some of my examples coming from later on.
Good, nice. Thank you, welcome. So let's go ahead and get started this morning. Eileen, would you like to get us started with giving us an overview of UDL, please?
Sure. Universal design for learning is something that I came upon myself as an educator in like my 21st year of teaching. And I was like, where has this been? What a wonderful framework for me as a teacher to instructionally design lessons. And the best way to describe this is what Katie Novak uses as an example from one of her books. Katie Novak's a thought leader in education around universal design for learning. She wrote the book UDL and Blended Learning with Catlin Tucker. Catlin Tucker is a thought leader around blended learning. So in the Katie Novak's work, she has you envision universal design for learning's framework as a three-legged stool. And one of the legs that's really important is that the teacher and the school leaders and the district leaders have this belief that all learners can learn, and that it's not that the role of the educator or the system to fix the student if they're struggling with learning. The idea is that you're to break down the barriers to their learning, whether it's a barrier in the learning environment, a barrier in the curriculum. The key to it is that all of us as humans can learn, but we all come with varied needs. And those varied needs we won't always know. So another belief is that you can intentionally design to break down those barriers ahead of time. So that first leg of the stool is having that strong belief. The second key to that stool for universal design for learning would be the leg of the system. And that system can be small. It could be within your own classroom, that you have within your system and your learning environment, things that are set up for your students to be successful. Maybe you as the teacher are doing your own self-learning and your own self-professional learning. But if a school leader or a district leader really wants to put universal design for learning at scale, which would really benefit all students, then they're going to need to build a system around that, a system of people that believe that all students can learn, that believe in that teachers need professional learning to gain the skills to help reduce the barriers, to believe that technology could be a tool towards helping reduce some of the barriers. Multi-tiered systems of support is a wonderful system. MTSS is a wonderful system to support your universal design for learning framework. Now, the third leg of the stool that Katie Novak talks about is the skills. And the teachers, the educators having the skills to be able to intentionally design lessons, look for the barriers, and look for strategies that they can use to break down some of those barriers. And then the overarching goal of universal design for learning is that the students are becoming expert learners, that they're becoming self-directed, purposeful, motivated, and that they can find ways to learn and slowly scaffold opportunities for them to become independent expert learners. So that's just kind of an overarching look at universal design for learning.
Thank you. Yeah. And Jason, yeah, go ahead and share a little bit about the overlay of the 3 networks with us, please.
Sure. So there's 3 networks, and I'll start by just explaining what all 3 of them are, and then I'll give examples of each of those. So the first one is engagement. The next one is representation, and the last one is action and expression. And so as it's been said, engagement is that active involvement in learning that is relevant, valuable, and interesting. And so one of the things that I like to think about is teachers have a lot of engagement strategies that they use in the classroom. And so what UDL can do is bring that to the next level. And so there's a really, really good document that Katie Novak has out called Would You Rather? And this document takes your engagement strategies, looks at the barriers that might be a part of that, and then gives you alternatives to that particular one. So one of the traditional practices that we use is turn and talk. And so in this document, it talks about the barrier in turn and talk is the linguistic barriers and social communication barriers that might be associated with that. And so the would you rather side of that is, would you rather discuss it with a partner, do a quick write or quick draw of a picture? And so that's just an example of one way to take that traditional practice of a turn and talk to the next level, a UDL level. The next item that we have or area is representation. And so representation is the access to multiple ways to experience or receive information. And so a lot of times we think about a typical lecture, or we want the student to read something. But when you think about representation, you might have several different opportunities for students to receive that information. So it might be a lecture, it might be a one-on-one with the teacher or a small group with the teacher. It might be a text within the book. It could be an audio or a podcast that they listen to. It could be a video that they watch, or it could even be infographics or, some of us pattern-minded people like spreadsheets and things like that. So some of those different ways to represent that information. And then the last one is action and expression. And so this is where we set goals, monitor and track progress toward goals, engage in metacognitive skill building through self-assessment, and demonstrate knowledge in a variety of ways. And so to break this down, it's really that goal setting process. And one of the examples that I like to use, Tony Vincent has a really, really cool way to, or a thing that he calls show what you know. And so it's just a ton of different ways to be able to show, using GarageBand or using a video or creating comics or creating posters, slide presentations, maybe even doing a digital book or some sort of presentation. And so just different ways to show what you know other than just a typical multiple choice test or report or something like that. So these are some of the different ways to use those 3 different areas.
Yeah, and I love the idea as you talk about each one of those. It just allows students to have agency. I mean, through the engagement piece and through the representation and the action and expression. I mean, they're able to apply their learning in the most comfortable way. They're able to learn what they need to know in their most comfortable way. You're giving them options with different modalities. And I just think that that's just one of the best ways to give students a chance to learn the information, and also helps fill those gaps that you're trying to reach with those students that are still struggling a little bit. So yeah. Very nice. Good. Thank you for that information there. The next thing I think I would like to talk about is, so we referenced to the blended learning rubric in our first episode. Can you both share some examples of ways that UDL and blended learning connect to that rubric?
Yeah, Jody, if you want to pull up that rubric just for our audience, on page 1, one of the key parts of this is domain number 4 for instruction. And if you look at that in the instruction, if you look at the fully integrated all the way on the right side, it says that it is evident that multiple modes of instruction are intentionally designed and available to the students based on their needs. And a full integration, when we're looking at someone that's doing blended learning and using the UDL framework in mind, they are going to spend a lot of time intentionally designing their lesson. And that's a core practice of a teacher that's really using UDL and the framework as their lens. And so I had shared with you the UDL Design Cycle, and I think that's a good way to really look at how a teacher would apply number 4 in their classroom. This comes from Katie Novak's book. It's called UDL Now. She's actually written it 3 times. Her 3rd edition just came out through the lens of a district curriculum lead, whereas previously, she wrote it from her lens as a teacher, then her lens as a principal, and now her lens as a district leader. And what I really like about this, if you look at the cycle, it starts with pre-work, where you're identifying your target academic standards. Then it moves into developing clear goals around those standards. Then it moves into developing your assessments that you're going to have students do in relation to the goals. Then it goes into the teacher developing their methods and materials that they'll have in the lessons to help reduce barriers. So what I love about this is this connects to number 4 so well because the teacher's intentionally taking the time through the pre-work in steps 1 through 4 before they ever deliver the lesson in step 5. And then a key portion of UDL is reflecting on it in step 6. So let me give an example of a teacher that I've been working with through some of the instructional coaching and how we're using this UDL design cycle along with blended learning components to try and reduce the barriers towards the students. So step 1 is we really need to identify the target academic standard. This happens to be a 6th grade middle school teacher. He is working with Mesopotamian civilizations. And what he did first was he talked to me about the barriers he has seen in the past. Students lack interest. They lack understanding because it's an ancient civilization that they don't really have a connection to. They really don't have a deep interest oftentimes in the content. And so we looked at what are the overarching academic standards that the students are required to gain. And a couple of them are that they have to identify and illustrate the locations of the first cities and civilizations and empires and why they chose their locations. They need to examine the impact of the people events and the various cultures, and they need to compare the benefits and costs of economic decisions made by ancient civilizations. Now, the overarching thing when we really looked at the standard is up above all these standards that said we really want the students to be able to connect ancient civilizations and the decisions they made to our current civilizations and the decisions and impact that their decisions make on our current lives. And so when we were able to dig into those standards and we were able to talk about why would this be relevant to the students? How could we make this engaging to the students? Why do we even want students to learn this? That it's so important. It's one of our Nebraska standards. And that ties into what can we do to get them engaged in this and connected into their lives. And so the teacher started thinking about, well, what if we took them more on an adventure of discovery around this? And we wondered, why are these civilizations gone? And what might make a civilization here in our current world disappear all of a sudden? What if a whole country disappeared or a whole community disappeared? What would be the reason behind that? And kind of trying to tap into more their curiosity at the beginning as to why is Mesopotamia no longer a civilization? And so what we designed is he wanted to have the students do more of the cognitive load of gaining the understanding versus him just lecture and then answer questions, lecture, answer questions. So he worked with his colleagues to design a web quest and partnered the students together through this web quest to kind of do some discovery around the ancient civilization. He included some video in it. He included some text within it. He included the interactive maps to kind of gain into it. And then he would work with small groups on the questioning around it. And so that's a big portion that I see on this rubric, was just really looking at how can we get them engaged in it? How can we intentionally design to reduce some of those barriers? If you wouldn't mind pulling up the second page to the rubric. The second page, really, he's going into 5, 6, 7, 8 really hard there by getting the students actively engaged with the content. And a big part of Universal Design for Learning is that you get the students becoming the learners and doing the heavy cognitive load. And you support them as a teacher by reducing the barriers. Instead of the teacher pushing all the content into the students' brains, it's the students working with the content in a variety of modes to try and gain the information. And when you see on the blended learning that the students are progressing independently, they can be doing that independently with a partner to help support and have them doing some of the sharing. But you could also allow students to independently progress through that web quest on their own. And then we talked a lot about, well, how would you be able to see the students learning throughout this? So there's going to be daily checkpoints of what they're learning in there. But in the end, he has to know that they can examine the impact of the people and events, and they also have to be able to compare the benefits and costs of the economic decisions that were made. So we talked about what would that look like at the end? How would you know that the students were able to do that standard? And what he came up with is he said, I want the students to design some type of commercial around the ancient Mesopotamian civilization, urging people to join their community and talking about the impact that the people had made within that area of their world, and talking about the benefits and the economic decisions and why somebody would want to join that civilization. And so we talked about how could we give the students multiple ways to share that learning. He originally said everybody has to do a video commercial, but we worked it into, could some maybe construct a poster? Because how do people in the real world today convince others to maybe join their community or join their cause? It's through media, it's through print, it's through a variety of ways. So he's looking at giving voice and choice, but making sure that he's built in that every student is still reaching the goal of being able to examine the impact of the people and events, and they're able to compare the benefits and costs of their economic decisions. So working with this teacher through it, I see a lot of connections around Universal Design for Learning and blended learning by really proactively looking at how can we reduce those barriers to the learning through engagement? How can we make it more relevant to them? How can we represent the content in a way that they can access it, whether it's through video, simulations, maps, graphic organizers? And then how can we use action and expression in a variety of ways throughout the unit, but also as their culminating project to make sure that they've met that standard? It is always going back to the goal being met through flexible means. And that's a key part of UDL.
Nice. Yeah. Great example, Eileen. Thank you for that. Jason, what example do you have to share with us?
Sure. So like I alluded to earlier, a lot of my work is in the STEM field. And so one of the projects that we've been working on really covers a lot of the rubric. And as you brought up that second page, there was really everything on this page is covered in one of our activities that we do with students, and it's called Be the Light. And basically what it does is it walks students through a concept where they can make a change, a real world change, by creating something either in their school, their community, or really in the world. And it focuses on what are the let me see here, the connect globally, think globally, the global goals for sustainable development. And so there's 17 different global goals that these students can can choose from, anywhere from poverty to hunger to health to education, gender equality, clean water. There's 17 different ones that they can choose from. And then what they do is they go through a design process. And the design process is really what gives them their voice and choice. We use the design process from John Spencer. It's called the launch cycle. And so the students walk through this launch cycle. But the cool part about it is they get an opportunity to go through. We have either a hard copy workbook or an electronic workbook that they can go through. And as they develop their empathy, they develop their prototype, they develop all these different things, they can walk through this process. And then the end goal for them is to actually present this to us here at the ESU 10, but hopefully present it to their school. They'll be working with community members. They get opportunities to work with others in the field. They do check-ins, not only with their school, but with us here at the ESU 10, our staff. And then at the very end, they get an opportunity to, quote, sell whatever they developed to what we call a STEM Fest. And it's just a kind of a year-end project where they get to show off what they have developed. And what they develop could be a product, it could be an event, it could be a learning opportunity. There's just so many different things that the students come up with, depending on what they came up with in terms of that those global goals and how it affects and impacts their passion or something that is affecting them at the school. And so it's just been really cool to see all the different projects and engagement that the kids have as they're working through this, because it's not only something that they're interested in, but it's making a real impact on others out in their community or the world.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just look how much they're making a difference for everybody else in their community, and then extending that globally. I mean, what a great opportunity for those students. So great. Oh my goodness, you guys, this was wonderful. So we need to pivot to our next segment. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise with UDL and blended learning this morning with us. I just love how UDL and blended learning can give educators the tools that they need to create meaningful pathways for those students. I just think it's a great way for teachers to start building lessons and designing lessons in order to get those kids where they need to be. So we're going to pivot to our next segment, What's New with You? So let's share some technology tips and tricks with the audience today. So do you guys have any tech tips or tricks that you can share with us today?
I would love to share one that can be as basic but advanced as you want, that would really connect well with UDL. And oftentimes teachers are saying, what can I just put in my lessons today that would help support this? And one would be the use of Google Slides, but in maybe different ways than what you're used to. A lot of our teachers will use Google Slides or PowerPoint to represent content in visual ways, which is a wonderful starting point. But Pear Deck is an add-on to Google Slides that you can easily take as an add-on. It's freemium. I use the free version. A lot of teachers think, oh, I need the paid version. You really don't. There's a lot of things that you can do. What you can do with it is the students can get the content on their device, so they can join your Google Slides, and then you have the slides right in front of them. So that helps the students with a visual barrier. It also helps with the focus and the metacognition skills and executive functioning skills the students might need as you're pacing the lesson and where you need them to visually be seeing. They can access the links within there a little bit easier. You can add in some formative assessment pieces so that you can check for understanding with the students in a variety of ways. You can even slide over and bring in templates for a quick graphic organizer or a drawing where the students are able to draw out or diagram what their understanding is. And then the other thing with Google Slides that you may not think of is Matt Miller from Ditch That Textbook. He has these wonderful ways to engage the students using Google Slides. So an example just recently that social studies teacher was using is the students had to identify and illustrate the locations of these ancient civilizations. That's really hard for students to understand. So Ditch That Textbook, Matt Miller has a template for interactive maps with Google Slides. So you pop in your Mid-Eastern civilization map, and then you can have little icons where the students can slide them in, they can draw, and then they can turn on and they can record themselves with them explaining these civilizations. And it's with the use of Google Slides, which isn't a hard reach for teachers if they're currently using Google Slides. It's just kind of re-envisioning with either Pear Deck or with the great templates that Matt Miller sends out that can get the students engaging and expressing their learning in a variety of ways.
Nice. Very interactive tool. Yeah. Good. Jason, do you have one to share?
Sure. Mine's more general in terms of I love using podcasts for instruction. And there's so many different things that we can play off of that in terms of a lot of kids like the Netflix idea of series. They like to binge watch different things. And so being able to create a series of podcasts or even vodcasts using GarageBand or just audio only, you can use the web-based Vocaroo, has a great way to record. But creating those series and then using, like Eileen said, using Google Slides. And there's all sorts of templates for storyboarding and being able to storyboard out what that series might look like, depending on what they're learning at the time. And so I just really think there's a variety of tools to create those new things that students like to consume and actually produce using those tools, and then having an authentic audience to be able to show those in is really cool too.
Nice. Yeah. I guess I would throw out Edpuzzle. I know it's not a new tool. I mean, it's been around for a while, but even tying Edpuzzle to what, a little bit of what you guys shared today, and having kids utilize Edpuzzle as a way to watch and learn content. If a teacher is going to share the same thing to all students, I know Catlin Tucker talks about that all the time. Why not put it into a video format and use Edpuzzle and then put the questions in there and allow those students to answer those questions and learn the content more at their own pace? So that would be, I think, a tool that would definitely be a good use for combining it with blended learning and UDL and the lessons that teachers design. So
I love that, Jody, because you're really reducing the barrier. If a teacher just says it once, the student only gets it once. But with universal design, they can rewind it. They can take it at their pace. You can really reduce some barriers by putting some of your key concepts in video for your students.
Yeah, good. So, all right. Well, I didn't see any comments from our audience. If anybody has anything else they'd like to share, any tech tools, we would love to do that, or continue to add them to the comments later once we share this out on our Facebook and YouTube and Twitter. But I do want to thank all of you who shared your ideas today, and I especially want to thank Eileen and Jason as being our guests today and for sharing some great information on how UDL and blended learning are connected. The one thing I think about this too is I know one of the things that they always talk about, and Katie Novak shares a lot about, learner variability. And it's not going away. It's there. So this gives teachers an opportunity to explore, the intersection of UDL and blended learning, to explore, those teachers, to help them design their lessons for all learners. I think that's so important, that we need to make sure that every student learns at a different pace. And so we have to make sure we meet the needs of those students. And both of you, thank you for your great work that you do at your ESU. And we look forward to seeing everyone on January 24th. So we will not meet again till January 24th. So just kind of keep that in mind for our next meeting and our next time with Blend Ed. And thank you guys for joining us. Have a great day.
Thank you.